Northside Christian Church is celebrating 50 years of connecting people to Christ and to one another. I want to tell you how it all started. In the beginning, there was a dream. Northside was the vision of Wallace and Myrtle Day. They prayed for nearly 20 years for the establishment of a church, a Christian church on the north side of Springfield. They lived at 810 East Jean Street, which is on the north side. They attended Loyal Christian Church, later known as Parkview Christian Church. They served faithfully there until they were given the opportunity to plant a new church. In February of 1970, Wallace and Myrtle were among 28 people from all three independent Christian churches, Parkview, Southland, and Glendale, who gathered at the home of Drew and Lois Butler to talk about the possibility of a new church plant. The meeting almost never happened. That evening, Drew's mother passed away unexpectedly. Lois, Drew's wife, said from the beginning, Satan tried to foil the attempts of these Christians, but Satan was foiled instead. 9 people committed themselves that evening to form the nucleus of the church as members. Those people were Wallace, Myrtle, and Laurel Day, Jim, Millie, and Eddie Jacobs, Don McFall, and Larry and Eileen Meinson.
My name's Larry Meinson, and this is my wife Eileen. I was the first minister at Northside. I was 23 years old when we started the church on March 1st, and I preached until November 1st. And at that time, the church grew to 40 people. We had 14 additions and 6 baptisms. So on March 1st, 1970, we met at 1051 East Lynn at Ed Williams' office space. It wasn't very big, but it was sure a blessing for us because it gave us a place. We had no place to meet when we decided to start a Northside church. A month after we started meeting at Williams' office building, we needed more space. And so because of Drew Butler knowing the president of the Electrical Workers Union, that they were able to work out a deal. And for $25 a week, we were able to meet on Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. Our first service was on April 5th, 1970 in the Electrical Workers Union building. Well, as the church was growing, I realized myself that if we're going to do any more, that we needed a full-time minister. So we talked about at the board meeting and decided to hire a full-time minister for me to step aside.
Harvey Wilson became Northside's first full-time minister on October 25th, 1970. By February 7th of 1971, a youth group was formed. 9 students formed that very first student ministry. From the beginning, Northside made student ministry a priority, and we continue to make it a priority 50 years later. On June 1st, 1971, the congregation purchased 3 acres of land on the north side of Springfield so that they could have a permanent home from which they could do ministry. Sandra Day recalls the time when several men came to her house to talk to her parents about the land. And her dad, Wallace Day, she recalls him saying, "Enough talking, I'm giving the first $500 for this land." If there are 2 words that encapsulate the ministry of Northside over the past 50 years, it would be
dedication and sacrifice.
Dedication and sacrifice.
Dedication and sacrifice. Let me give you an example. Wallace Day and Myrtle Day owned 80 acres. They had this farm with a creek running through it, farmhouse in place. It was located between Long Lane and Buffalo. Wallace and his brother-in-law Frank even built a house on the property. Wallace had a dream of being a farmer. See, in the 1960s, he worked for Foremost as a night foreman. But he had a dream of retiring and being on that farm. But when Northside needed that land and Northside needed a building, Wallace Day sold those 80 acres. And when he sold that farm, he didn't just sell property. He didn't just give up property. In many ways, he gave up a dream for an even bigger dream. A dream of a church that would connect people to Christ and to one another. The two words that describes: dedication and sacrifice.
Hello, I'm Woody Wilkinson, and this is my lovely wife, Rose Wilkinson. And I became the new minister of the Northside Christian Church in August of 1972. One of the great experiences that we had was going through a couple of building programs. When I looked at the building plans, the way the ground sloped and everything, that there would be a basement and a top that would be put on that. First Sunday, we had a very good crowd of people that were interested, but it was just something exciting to the people that were starting, and we've got things ready and we're trying to move forward. Construction of the upper building, the sanctuary, took place on July 5th of 1977, and then of December 25th, that's when we had our first service in there.
Two words that come to my mind that it took to buy the land, to build the basement, and to build the top part of the building are dedication and sacrifice.
Northside grew during Woody's ministry from an average of 50 to an average of 120. In 1981, Woody resigned from the ministry at Northside. By the fall of 1982, Northside was struggling in attendance, they were struggling financially, they were struggling to make their building payments, and so they had to let the youth minister and the lead minister go. Northside was in need. But unbeknownst to Northside, so was a former missionary.
Sarah and I ministered for a little over 10 years in Santiago, Chile, and I didn't do a very good job taking care of myself spiritually and emotionally. I worked too many hours giving without setting aside enough hours to take in. But at that time, I felt like I would never probably be in a staff ministry position again. The burnout was taking its toll on me. And after about 16, 18 months, I was beginning to feel like I think I ought to be giving more. I think I need to be investing my life more, and I felt emotionally and spiritually ready to do that. We went and visited Northside. The first time was on a Sunday night in December, I believe, and there were about 18 or 20 people present. I remember the sanctuary was so dark on a winter night like that, and we began to talk with the church, and we began to realize that this was a hurting church. They had defaulted on 5 building payments. And so the church asked us to take on the ministry. I preached my first sermon at Northside on December 26, 1982, and there were about 75 people there. Jesus said that the kingdom of God is like leaven in dough. It's like a mustard seed. It's intended to grow. What we need to do sometimes is just get out of God's way. 6 of us took off a week's vacation, and we spent that week building what we called our East Wing, education wing. We were running out of space again, so in 1989 we began the construction of an adult classroom space to the north of our building. In July 1994, Wayne and Kim Bushnell were hired as our youth and associate minister, working primarily with youth and children. I first met Wayne at camp, and I saw the potential that God had given him to do significant things for God's kingdom. And I already knew at that time when we hired him that he could very easily fit into the lead role here when we were ready to step aside. We built a family life center with the explicit purpose of reaching young couples. We prayed for a specific number of young couples, and I don't remember how many it was, but what was interesting, when we began to pray for those couples, they came before we got our family life center up. God said once again, hey, this is all in my hands. In 1999, we bought 41 acres to provide for the future growth of our church. Just a few years later, we had our land paid for, and then we had a groundbreaking ceremony in 2006. We held our last worship service there on August 26, 2007. Over 700 people met to worship one last time in that building that held so much history for us. On September 2nd, 2007, we had our first worship service at our present location. In my great wisdom, I decided that when we moved to our new worship center, it was Labor Day, so we could all get together in one service because there wouldn't be that many people there. But it turned out that 771 people celebrated our first worship service at our new building. We had people all over the place. It was an exciting day for all of us.
Just think how different church looked and felt on that Sunday compared to their very first Sunday in March of 1970. And yet they have been our greatest encouragers and supporters and cheerleaders. Even though things were different, methods were different, they have been people on mission who have supported what God has done here. You know, in 2008, Ed Holt retired as lead minister, and he passed on that baton of leadership to me. And Ed and our leadership team, they modeled what a leadership transition ought to look like. And the church has continued to grow. When Kim and I think of two words that describe the ministry of Northside today, it's the same two words that have described the ministry of Northside from the very beginning. And those words are dedication and sacrifice. You know, we do a lot of things together here at Northside. We reach people together. We serve people together. We worship together. We definitely have some fun together.
We have had here.
Over the past 50 years, so many have been a part of the Northside story to connect people to Christ and to one another. From Hal Brown, Northside's first youth minister in 1979, to Chris Heiss in 1988, to Kevin Punch and Garrett Hawley today. From part-time children's ministers like Matt Roseborough, to our full-time ministers Jeff and Cheryl Bryant, and now today to Tiffany Bloom, Brenda Presco, Bethany Buffington. Many others on staff through the years have dedicated and sacrificed themselves for this ministry. They've contributed, they've served, they've given of themselves. You recognize so many of them who have served you, loved you, cared for you as well. There are many others that we don't even have time to mention. And then there's you. There's the thousands of people in this church who have served and volunteered and sacrificed and been willing to do whatever it takes to work towards the end goal. And you know the end goal. It's Revelation 7:9. It paints the picture for us where there's this great multitude that no one can count from every nation, every tribe, every people, every language. They're standing before the throne and before the Lamb, and they're being led to springs of living water. And Jesus is there wiping the tears from their eyes. That's the end of the story. And that's what Northside has worked towards for 50 years. One of the great blessings at Northside is that our founders were committed to the mission, not the methods. The methods changed, but the mission stayed the same. No matter the location, Northside has always been a grace-filled family, living in community with the spirit of unity. Northside has been committed to children's ministry, youth ministry, and family ministry, and we continue to be committed to that today. We are committed to be dedicated and to sacrifice for our mission, which is to connect people to Christ and one another. We really are committed to reach people of every tongue, tribe, and nation with the good news of Jesus. You know, when those individuals 50 years ago, when they planted those seeds of faith into this new church, they had no idea what that harvest of faith was going to produce. But now, 50 years later, when we look back and we look at a church of 17 and 100 and 200 and 500 and now well over 1,200, we don't look back and say, wow, look at what they did. No, we say, wow, look at what God has done. Northside, happy 50th anniversary.